I feel like it's a perfect time to get into a 5-hour debate, which we're not going to watch all 5 hours of. I will be skipping through it. But the Israel Palestine debate commenced on the Lex Fridman show. It is literally almost it's 5 hours long. We're not going to watch, obviously, all 5 hours. And I'm going to be hitting the 1.75 playback speed. But I think that in spite of some of the, or at least one individual that is a part of this debate that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, Rabbani, Morris, and Finkelstein are, even if you don't agree with them, important figures in this discourse, important figures that have literally put forward work that has changed our understanding of the history of Israel. And I mean, literally, like, I'm talking about Benny Morris, who I don't agree with, right? Well, I do agree with his earlier work, but I don't agree with his ideology. I don't agree with the things that he says, but still, I'm not going to discount his work, which was very important in the New Historians in uncovering some of the some of the aspects of the inception of the Israeli state that was basically kept a secret, even though it wasn't really kept a secret. It was more so just not, I guess, openly discussed as much in the Israeli side of scholarly work. But yeah.
First question is about 1948. For Israelis, 1948 is the establishment of the State of Israel and the War of Independence. For Palestinians, 1948 is the Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand what's going on today, and maybe helps us understand the roots of all of this that started even before 1948. I was hoping that Norm can speak first, then Benny, then Ween, and then Steve. Norm?
After World War II, the British decided that they didn't want to deal with the Palestine question anymore, and the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations. Now, as I read the record, the UN was not attempting to arbitrate or adjudicate rights and wrongs. It was confronting a very practical problem. There were two national communities in Palestine, and there were irreconcilable differences on fundamental questions.
Is Benny Morris the one that said they did the Nakba but thought it was poggers? Benny Morris's earlier work, very important, which Norm will get to in a second. He's going to bring it up because it's impossible not to. Very openly details, alongside Ilan Pape's work, which was originally controversial, considered controversial, but he was vindicated afterwards. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to relitigate this. I've talked about it quite a bit. But Benny Morris's early work basically detailed out a planned attempt of ethnic displacement, which is the Nakba. It is true, at a time when like other Israeli scholars had never considered this or outright denied it. Benny Morris later on in his career took this weird turn where he could not obviously disparage his previous work, which was very important for Israeli history, right? And and basically started saying, yeah, sure, it was forcible ethnic displacement, it was deliberate, but it was a good thing. So in the simplest terms, yes, he was one of the people who uncovered some of the atrocities in the Nakba, or like the deliberacy of the atrocities in the Nakba, and then turned around and was like, but it was actually kind of chill because there was nothing else we could have done as Israel. You know what I mean? A sad change of affairs, a sad change of pace, yes, but still, his work is important regardless. He said the Nakba was a product of Zionism. Exactly. This is like very important to understand, especially considering that he's making a point that it was just the response to the Arab attack, therefore justified. Yeah, except it doesn't really matter because he openly fucking was the one who said there was a deliberate attempt, which a lot of other historians have used his work and investigated further to find that like this deliberate attempt was also calculated, crafted. He didn't say that. You're just making this up. You're just lying. Benny Morris's thesis in Birth was that it was not a systematic plan. It was a complicated process. You know what? I'll just let Benny and Norm discuss it. They're there. They're in front of you. You'll see in a second.
Questions, most importantly, looking at the historic record on the question of immigration and associate with the question of immigration, the question of
Dudes who defend Israel love saying complicated, okay? It's their favorite fucking word. It's not that complicated, brother. It's actually not complicated at all. As a matter of fact, it was complicated in the way that we understood it, but thankfully, due to his work and many others in the new historians, it's no longer as complicated. You can do the smug laugh thing, but you clearly haven't read his books if you're claiming that.
land.
Let's continue.
The UN Special Committee on Palestine, which came into being before the UN 181 partition resolution, the UN Special Committee, it recommended 2 states in Palestine. There was a minority position represented by Iran, India, Yugoslavia. They supported 1 state, but they believed that if forced to, the 2 communities would figure out some sort of modus vivendi and live together. United Nations General Assembly supported partition between what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, in my reading of the record, and I understand there's new scholarship on the subject, which I've not read.
My favorite part of this process, we're not going to talk about contemporary Israeli history and like what this version of the genocide looks like, is that like there is a 3,000-year jump that you need to have to be able to justify even the buildup to the Nakba. Okay? Like it is a settler colonial operation through and through. Like objectively, that is what it was, right? Planned and designed by the British Empire. Are there good justifications for obviously a lot of Jewish people escaping Europe? Certainly, right? Especially with the Holocaust. Having said that, however, there were people there. That is the major point. And those people understandably were like, what the f*** are you doing, British Empire? Stop doing settler colonialism, British Empire. That's it. That's it. That is like, it's so simple. So because of that reason, it wasn't planned and designed. Again, there's zero evidence of that. Yes, it was, dude. Planned Dalit is exactly that. And that comes from Ilan Pape's work, which originally was considered controversial and maybe even false. One of his actual research associates was the one who then went and interviewed the people, and now we know because the people that did plan Dalit were there. They were alive. They're still alive. So no, it is not wrong at all. What I'm explaining to you is not wrong at all. You just want it to be wrong. You act like this is a contentious conversation when all you're doing is just trying to wash away atrocity. No, Plan D was a military operation that called for the expulsion of villages used in military bases along major routes and border regions. It was a military plan. Yes! Yes! And these were not villages being used as military bases. You're lying. And the very same original Zionist brigades that used that basically did the atrocities at Deir Yassin, okay, and many of these other Palestinian villages openly admit that it is a lie, that they were basically spying on villages with no military in them. So all you're doing right now is the worst Hasbara troll on the planet with the same exact username that you use on Reddit, where you post in the Destiny subreddit, is to try and minimize the atrocities. I gave you one of the villages. Deir Yassin is a village that was in the original inception of the Nakba, a village where atrocities occurred in the hands of Irgun and in the hands of Lihi. Why do you know that? You know why we know that? You know why we know that? Because the fuckers that did the atrocities are still very much alive. And some of the people were left alive as well, so they could go and carry on the fear to the other Palestinian villages, so the forcible expulsion would be easier when they inevitably move to other Palestinian occupied areas. Palestinian occupied areas, I can't believe I'm using that terminology. It's not even occupied, it's just where they lived. The notion that like, yeah, Tantura is another one. The notion that this is like controversial, if anyone tells you this, if anyone tries to tell you this is a controversial thing, okay, I'm talking about knowing his Reddit because I have the CIA in here. Immediately they found out that he has the same exact he has the same exact name on Reddit, and people were talking about it in the chat. 500 villages were destroyed. This is not up for debate. Lamont Palestinians were ethnically cleansed by explicit design. I know. Wow, amazing. I'm aware of Deir Yassin, which was an atrocity. You made a claim about systematic policy. Yes, the systematic policy under Plan Dalit was to forcibly expel and do atrocities in certain villages that they were spying on, villages that had no military usage whatsoever. You can claim that there was military usage for the villages, but there were no militants in those villages. There was just villagers. As a matter of fact, Deir Yassin, famously, the one that you know about as well, and the one that you have to admit was a massive atrocity, famously had a peace agreement with the surrounding Jewish villages. That is why they were so easily slaughtered by the two militia groups that I just described to you. One of those two militia groups, as a matter of fact, openly called themselves terrorists. Stern Gang. Leahy is literally a terror cell. Participated in the King David bombing, but also beyond that, openly consider themselves terrorists. Why do you have to look into who I am? Weird. That's not what Plan D was. There were literally battles in these villages. Oh my God. Okay. The Israeli plan was pretty obvious. Everyone understood that forcible expulsion must occur. How do we get everyone to be forcibly expelled from the villages without actually killing all of them? Well, we do some atrocities in 2 of the villages, 3 of the villages, 4 of the villages, maybe 10 villages. And then when we go to the other places where there's a shit ton of Palestinians, we can just do psychological operations, psyops. That's the modern terminology for it. What are some of these psyops? Like going in and blasting machine gun fire in these surrounding cities, basically kettling in, corralling the Palestinian civilian population that you are openly telling they must leave if they do not want to face the same atrocities. That's exactly what happened. That is exactly what they did. They would shut off access to all parts of cities with the exception of like one area where they can funnel every single citizen, every single civilian. Why did that work? Why was it effective? Benny Morris will say, well, it's because the Arab leaders told them to leave and even like forced them to leave. Okay? The Arab leaders told them to leave and forced them to leave, and that's why they left. Meanwhile, the real reason as to why many left, which by the way, even if the Arab leaders told them to leave, it doesn't matter. They should have still been allowed back in. And then the IDF, after the formation of the Israeli state, definitely still kept killing Palestinian villagers that were trying to sneak back into their homes or sneak back to tend their own crop, mind you. More atrocities that are open and very easy to find. Okay, so that's just another thing that you need to remember. Benny Morris explicitly said the Arab leader leaving stuff was way, way overblown. You're lying about him again. Benny Morris, in this conversation, is going to literally bring up Arab leadership also telling people to leave. It does not matter. It's the major reasons as to why people left from these villages, even if it was literally Arab leaders who said, leave the villages, we will surround them and we will save you, and then you can come back. It still doesn't matter because these are civilians, dumbass. Unless you think Arabs are a monolithic barbarian horde that must be ethnically cleansed by the supreme Jewish state that came afterwards. And the reality is you do think that because you're a Zionist, and that's what Zionism is. Literally, Judeo-supremacy, an ethno-state that must be built. And how do you build that demographic nightmare of an ethno-state? Well, you build it by forcibly displacing Palestinians that live there that aren't Jewish. That's how you do it. That's the whole point. These are civilians. These are farmers, okay? The fact that they were not allowed back into their homes is unacceptable. Even if the Arab leadership was like, yes, leave now and you can come back, which disputed, right? Obviously, if that was the case, then they wouldn't have needed to do Deir Yassin and Tantura and many other atrocities so that they could put the fear of God into the hearts of all these Palestinian civilians that were forcibly displaced, okay? The notion. Interesting how debate weirdos usually aren't this bad when you aren't watching specific people. Yes, of course, it's Destiny's fucking audience of like psychotic Hasbara defenders. It's so weird. It's so fucking weird too. Already said that Benny Morris changed his stance and further research expanded on his original ideas. I don't know what you're tripping about the semantics for, because he has nothing to do. The only thing he has is semantics, because he's butthurt and trying to defend a person's earlier work that was formative and important, as I openly recognized and mentioned, while simultaneously parse it from a pro-Zionist position.
But so far as I've read the record, there's no clarity on what the United Nations General Assembly meant by a Jewish state and an Arab state, except for the fact that the Jewish state would be demographically, the majority would be Jewish, and the Arab state demographically would be Arab. The UNSCOP, the UN Special Committee on Palestine, it was very clear, and it was reiterated many times, that in recommending two states, each state, the Arab state and the Jewish state, would have to guarantee full equality of all citizens with regard to political, civil, and religious matters. Now, that does raise the question, if there is absolute full equality of all citizens, both in the Jewish state and the Arab state, with regard to political rights, civil rights, and religious rights, apart from the demographic majority, it's very unclear what it meant to call a state Jewish or call a state Arab. In my view, the partition resolution was the correct decision. I do not believe that the Arab and Jewish communities could, at that point, be made.
For the record, it's pretty gross to call me a Zionist ethno-supremacist when I'm just disputing you historical claims. Apparently, that's all you can do, though. Keep fucking crying, bitch. What do you mean? Are you not? Are you an anti-Zionist? Is that your claim here? Is that what you're going to do? You're an anti-Zionist? You're an anti-Zionist Benny Morris defender? Like, what's going on? So you disagree with Benny Morris? What do you mean? Because the moment that you say the Nakba is a complex event, you've already conceded. You've already told me what your position is. I'm not staking a political position. I'm interested in the fucking history. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are a cowardly fence sitter who's not actually a fence sitter at all. Because guess what, dude? Neutrality in the face of clear opposition is siding with the oppressor. And that's precisely what you're doing. And you're doing it in the most cowardly way possible. Oh, I'm not a Zionist. But also, the forcible ethnic displacement of 750,000 Palestinians, that was a deliberate attempt made by the inception, that followed the inception of the Israeli state, actually is not that much of a catastrophe. As a matter of fact, even if it is a catastrophe, it had to happen. So yes, why did it have to happen? So that there could be a majority Jewish state planted on top of this indigenous population that was forcibly expelled from their lands. You are no different in many respects to a Holocaust denier trying to be like, well, I'm just asking questions, bro. Is it actually 6 million? But the only difference is our reception of this information is not seen the same, because the atrocities obviously are not the same, right? In severity. But one is not even up for debate. If someone comes in here, I ban them immediately. If someone came in here and tried to fucking do this exact same kind of like atrocity denial, I would ban them for the Holocaust. I would ban them. Understandably so, because why the fuck would I debate a fascist? But when it comes to talking about Israel, that same kind of atrocity denial is so perfectly permissible, it seems. It's ridiculous. And it's not even just the fact that 750,000 people had to be forcibly displaced, right? It's also the fact that they were not allowed to come back. That's it. Not allowing 750,000 farmers, civilians, doctors, teachers to go back to their fucking homes that their families have had for multiple generations is a disgusting atrocity. Okay? It is disgusting. And any kind of defense of this kind of behavior is gross. It's inhumane. He's just debating the semantics and nitty-gritty facts when it doesn't matter because the displacement and atrocities still happen. Yes. Are you incapable of separating your politics from academic investigation? A complex process can lead to facts that can be endorsed by pro or anti-Zionists, and yes, they barred return. I'm not denying that. I'm saying that you're lying about the systematic pre-planned policy part. Brother, you are trying to dispute the inception of these actions without addressing the consequences, okay? The intent, in my opinion, from where I'm standing after everything I have read, especially when you compare it to what came after, is pretty obvious. If you look at early Zionists, which, by the way, it's so funny. Why am I debating this guy? This is everything that Norm Finkelstein is going to lay out right now. It is so fucking stupid to have this conversation. Oh, it just kind of happened like that. 750,000 Palestinians just kind of happened to leave their homes and then kind of could not come back. It just happened on accident. What a beautiful accident. What a beautiful accident it was. Okay, what about now? What about all these fucking civilians now? Can they not be a part of like a singular state? No, we can't have that. Why? Because of demographic concerns. Why is this a demographic concern, mind you? Why is this a demographic concern? Why should we concern ourselves with what ethno-nationalist fascists are concerning themselves with? Unimaginable. Unimaginable. No other world in which this is like a genuine perspective, okay? So smug.
Aid to live together. I disagree with the minority position of India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, and that not being a practical option, 2 states was the only other option. In this regard, I would want to pay tribute to what was probably the most moving speech at the UN General Assembly proceedings by the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. I was very tempted to quote it at length, but I recognized that would be taking too much time. So I asked a young friend, Jamie Stern-Weiner, to edit it and just get the essence of what Foreign Minister Gromyko.
Did it just kind of happen? There was a war that had many factors involved. Okay, brother, I love your interest in continuing this derailment, but you are literally taken away from a 5-hour conversation of dudes, with the exception of Destiny, that know a shit ton more about this issue than yourself or myself, including the very guy whose work we are currently disputing for no fucking particular reason. I'm going to give you an hour off. You'll probably be back by the time because I'll probably still be watching this, but like, go write your manifesto, talk about how I'm fraudulent or whatever the fuck, and maybe that will help you sleep comfortably and soundly at night, like that you're simply defending the academic principles behind Benny Morris's work. Yeah, it's complicated. It was just a war. It was just a war. Yeah, they're going to address all of that, dumb fuck, okay? It wasn't just a war. It was just a war when it comes to 750,000 fucking civilians being ethnically displaced from their ancestral homes. Okay? What comes after just the war it only works if you legitimately in your mind believe that like Arabs are a monolithic force of barbarian primitives. Okay? Like apes. It's so stupid.
Gromyko had to say. During the last war, Gromyko said, the Jewish people underwent exceptional sorrow and suffering without any
Let's be honest, would you cover this debate if D wasn't in it? Fuck yes. 1,000,000%. Norm Finkelstein versus Benny Morris, I would absolutely cover. Norm Finkelstein is one of the most obsessive freak lords on the planet when it comes to going through each individual minutia of the work of other academics, okay? He literally destroyed Alan Dershowitz over his very obvious plagiarism. After Alan Dershowitz plagiarized another work from another scholar who Norm Finkelstein had fucking eviscerated beforehand. This is not just some random fucking old guy who's an asshole, okay? Many people don't understand, I don't think. He's written so many fucking books on the matter. Come on.
Exaggeration, this sorrow and suffering are indescribable. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are wandering about in various countries of Europe in search of means of existence and in search of shelter. The United Nations cannot and must not regard this situation with indifference. Past experience, particularly during the Second World War, shows that no Western European state was able to provide adequate assistance for the Jewish people in defending its rights and its very existence from the violence of the Hitlerites and their allies. This is an unpleasant fact, but unfortunately, like all other facts, it must be admitted. Gromyko went on to say, in principle, he supports one state, or the Soviet Union supports one state. But, he said, if relations between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine proved to be so bad that it would be impossible to reconcile them and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of the Arabs and the Jews, the Soviet Union would support two states. I personally am not convinced that the two states would have been unsustainable in the long term if, and this is a big if, the Zionist movement had been faithful to the position it proclaimed during the UNSCOP public hearings. At the time, Ben-Gurion testified, quote, I want to express what we mean by a Jewish state. We mean by a Jewish state simply a state where the majority of the people are Jews, not a state where a Jew has in any way, any privilege more than anyone else. A Jewish state means a state based on absolute equality of all her citizens and on democracy. Alas, this was not to be. As Professor Morris has written, quote, Zionist ideology and practice were necessarily and elementally expansionist. And then he wrote in another book, transfer, the euphemism for expulsion, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land
These are Benny's own words he's saying. He's
was
reading back.
Arab into a Jewish state. And a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab population. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders, the Yeshuv being the Jewish community, the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place if a Jewish state was to arise or safely endure. Or, as Professor Morris retrospectively put it, quote, a removing of a population was needed. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established, unquote. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution, while Israeli leaders, acting under compulsions inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism, found the pretext in the course of the First Arab-Israeli War to expel the indigenous population and expand its borders. I therefore conclude that neither side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it.
Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that you make a lengthy statement in the beginning.
Norman only quoting stuff. Lamau, you guys are delusional if you don't think this looks bad on him. Using your interlocutor's formative work in talking about the deliberate nature of the ethnic displacement campaigns is crazy. See, Pan Stan, he literally is a historian confirming everything he says, though. That is like, you are the most baby brain person I've ever fucking encountered. If you literally are looking at a situation where he is describing the source material directly to the person in front of him that wrote the source material as evidence of his position. What more can you do in this circumstance? Like, what? Motherfucker, I know that if your favorite debate lord did the using your own words against you technique, you would love that. He's basically doing that in an academic setting, as close to an academic setting as you can get. You know what I mean? That's crazy. But once again, betraying the ultimate the ultimate position supposedly being about arriving at the truth. You care about the aesthetics. You care about the aesthetics of justifying ethnic cleansing in this circumstance. Okay? This is the problem with simply liking debate for the debate aspect of it. You can try to moralize it. You can try to moralize it by saying, no, debates are how you arrive at the truth. But you very openly recognize how superficial your interest is in debating when you go, well, the optics of this look really bad. Not only are you wrong because the optics of it are not bad, as a matter of fact, but you're also demonstrating that you don't give a fuck about the truth at all. Please.
Benny, I hope it's okay to call everybody by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said.
Yeah. UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, recommended partition. The majority of UNSCOP recommended partition, which was accepted by the UN General Assembly in November 1947, essentially looking back to the Peel Commission in 1937. 10 years earlier, a British commission had looked at the problem of Palestine, the two warring national groups who refused to live together, if you like, or consolidate a unitary state between them. And Peel said there should be two states. That's the principle. The country must be partitioned into two states. This would give a modicum of justice to both sides, if not all their demands, of course. And the United Nations followed suit. The United Nations, UNSCOP, and then the UN General Assembly, representing the will of the international community, said two states is the just solution in this complex situation. The problem was that immediately with the passage of the resolution, the Arab states and the Arabs of Palestine said no, as Norman Finkelstein said. They said no, they rejected the partition idea, the principle of partition, not just the idea of what percentage which side should get, but the principle of partition they said no to. The Jews should not have any part of Palestine for their sovereign territory. Maybe Jews could live as a minority in Palestine. That also was problematic in the eyes of the Palestinian Arab leadership. Hussein had said only Jews who were there before 1917 could actually get citizenship and continue to live there. But the Arabs rejected partition, and the Arabs of Palestine launched, in very disorganized fashion, war against the resolution, against the implementation of the resolution, against the Jewish community in Palestine. And this was their defeat in that civil war between the two communities while the British were withdrawing from Palestine, led to the Arab invasion, the invasion by the Arab states in May 1948 of the country. Again, basically with the idea of eradicating or preventing the emergence of a Jewish state in line with the United Nations decision and the will of the international community. Norman said that the Zionist enterprise, and he quoted me, meant from the beginning to transfer or expel the Arabs of Palestine, or some of the Arabs of Palestine. And I think he's sort of quoting out of context. The context in which the statements were made that the Jewish state could only emerge if there was a transfer of Arab population was preceded, in the way I wrote it and the way it actually happened, by Arab resistance and hostilities towards the Jewish community. Had the Arabs accepted partition, there would have been a large Arab minority in the Jewish state, which emerged in 47. And in fact, Jewish economists and state builders took into account that there would be a large Arab minority and its needs would be cared for, etc. But this was not to be, because the Arabs attacked. And had they not attacked, perhaps a Jewish state with a large Arab minority could have emerged, but this didn't happen. They went to war.
Yeah. It happened because the Arab states attacked, or the Arab state attacked, but it simultaneously didn't exist, which he also recognizes. Basically saying that this was an inevitability. You just oopsied your way into doing settler colonialism, even though you definitely did do settler colonialism, which is never done through pure happenstance. Okay. It's not done through pure happenstance. It doesn't happen over an oopsie. So no matter what happens, you will always get back to, obviously, the Balfour Declaration, and everything beyond that is going to turn into, well, 3,000 years ago, Jews were expelled from this land. Okay? There's like a massive period of time that you cannot account for to justify, which is why Ben Shapiro and others, who are way worse at doing this, by the way, than Benny Morris, of course, will consistently just like talk about that aspect of it to establish a moral foundation as to why Zionism actually is like biblically backed. Okay? Both historically and biblically backed. Because ultimately, when you just simply leave it at, well, there was a partition, without talking about like why this was completely unacceptable, because it was a settler colonial project that the Arabs were understandably not fond of, considering that they were losing their ancestral lands, okay, to a empire that was voluntarily bringing up new settlers, like consistently bringing in new settlers into historic Palestine. Like, if you don't mention this part, if you don't frame it as what it is, then yeah, you can try to engage with it, but you can try to justify it, but it's still silly.
Jews resisted, and in the course of that war, Arab populations were driven out. Some were expelled, some left because Arab leaders advised them to leave or ordered them to leave. And at the end of the war, Israel said they can't return because they just tried to destroy the Jewish state. And that's the basic reality of what happened in 48. The Jews created a state. The Palestinian Arabs never bothered to even try to create a state before 48 and in the course of the 1948 war. And for that reason, they have no state to this day. The Jews do have a state because they prepared to establish a state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to establish a state when you're like 750,000 people are just like removed from their homes. You know what I mean? Yeah. As a victim of colonial occupation, my oh my, how did that not happen? It's crazy.
State fought for it and established it hopefully lastingly.
When you say hostility, in case people are not familiar, there was a full-on war where Arab states invaded, and Israel won that war.
Let me just add to
the reason why I'm doing this is because, like, obviously there's rules around this, but there's a banned streamer on screen. I'm not trying to bring attention to it, but he is not the focal point of this otherwise debate between academics on the subject matter, which is why it's allowed. So I'm just trying to, do my very best.
Clarify, the war had two parts to it. The first part was the Arab community in Palestine, its militiamen, attacked the Jews from November 1947. In other words, from the day after the UN partition resolution was passed, Arab gunmen were busy shooting up Jews, and that snowballed into a full-scale civil war between the two communities in Palestine. In May 1948, a second stage began in the war in which the Arab states invaded the new state, attacked the new state, and they too were defeated, and thus the state of Israel emerged. In the course of this two-stage war, a vast Palestinian refugee problem occurred.
And so after that, the transfer, the expulsion, the thing that people call the Nakba happened. William, could you speak to 1948 and the historical significance of it?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to limit myself to...
Benny just almost bar for bar repeated what you just said he would say. Yes, because I'm very familiar with his work. I know what his perspective is, and I know how his perspective, I know what he's saying. That is why it's not like it's called... It's not pre-watching something. It's just knowing that. It's just knowing what he is going to say because I've read his work.
Just a few points regarding Zionism and transfer. I think Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist Organization, had it exactly right when he said that the objective of Zionism is to make Palestine as Jewish as England is English or France is French. In other words, as Norman explained, a Jewish state requires Jewish political, demographic, and territorial supremacy. Without those three elements, the state would be Jewish in name only. And I think what distinguishes Zionism is its insistence, supremacy, and exclusivity. That would be my first point. The second point is, I think what the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Andrei Gromyko, said is exactly right, with one reservation. Gromyko was describing a European savagery unleashed against Europe's Jews. At the time, it wasn't Palestinians or Arabs. The savages and the barbarians were European to the core. It had nothing to do with developments in Palestine or the Middle East. Secondly, at the time that Gromyko was speaking, those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and others who were in need of safe haven were still overwhelmingly on the European continent and not in Palestine. And I think, given the scale of the savagery, I don't think that any one state or country should have borne the responsibility for addressing this crisis. I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed. Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the United States, which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. But instead, what passed for the international community at the time decided to partition Palestine. And here I think we need to judge the partition resolution against the realities that obtained at the time. Two-thirds of the population of Palestine was Arab. The Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about 1/3 of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. As a preeminent Palestinian historian, Walid al-Khalidi has pointed out, the partition resolution, in giving roughly 55% of Palestine to the Jewish community, and I think 41, 42% to the Arab community, to the Palestinians, did not preserve the position of each community or even favor one community at the expense of the others. Rather,
I'm cringing so fucking hard at my community. Listen to the words that are coming out of these people's mouths instead of hyper focusing and hyper fixating like a bunch of brain broken, drama obsessed fucking perverts about why Destiny is there. We already fucking covered it. Okay? Stop. Jesus Christ. I'm not watching this because Destiny's there. Okay? Please stop obsessing. You are behaving exactly in the same way that his community obsesses. Please. Jesus Christ, dude. Just like you're missing the forest for the trees. I've seen thousands of comments at this point in the chat, hyper focusing, hyper fixating on one aspect of this. Okay?
it thoroughly inverted and revolutionized the relationship between the two communities. And as many have written, the Nakba was the inevitable consequence of partition, given the nature of Zionism, given the territorial disposition, given the weakness of the Palestinian community, whose leadership had been largely decimated during a major revolt at the end of the 1930s, given that the Arab states were still very much under French and British influence. The Nakba was inevitable, the inevitable product of the partition resolution. And one last point also about the UN's partition resolution is, yes, formally, that is what the international community decided on the 29th of November, 1947. It's not a resolution that could ever have gotten through the UN General Assembly today for a very simple reason. It was a very different General Assembly. Most African, most Asian states were not yet independent. Were the resolution to be placed before the international community today, and I find it telling that the minority opinion was led by India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, I think they would have represented the clear majority. So partition, given what we know about Zionism, given that it was entirely predictable what would happen, given the realities on the ground in Palestine, was deeply unjust. And the idea that either the Palestinians or the Arab states could have accepted such a resolution is I think, an illusion. That was in 1947. We saw what happened in 48 and 49. Palestinian society was essentially destroyed. Over 80%, I believe, of Palestinians resident in the territory that became the State of Israel were either expelled or fled, and ultimately were ethnically cleansed, because ethnic cleansing consists of two components. It's not just forcing people into refuge or expelling them. It's just as importantly preventing their return. And here, and Benny Morris has written, I think, an article about Yosefites and the transfer committees. There was a very detailed initiative to prevent the return, and it consisted of razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground, which was systematically implemented, and so on. And so Palestinians became a stateless people. Now, what is the most important reason that no Arab state was established in Palestine? Well, since the 1930s, the Zionist leadership and the Hashemite leadership of Jordan, as has been thoroughly researched and written about by the Israeli-British historian Avi Shlaim, essentially colluded to prevent the establishment of an independent Arab state in Palestine in the late 1940s. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about
that. Also beyond the already 750,000 people being forcibly moved and not allowed to return to their homes at gunpoint is kind of a big deal. Basically destroys any kind of like state development project that you could have had. You know what I mean? A lot of this argument basically does resort back to, always reverts back to might is right. That's it. Might is right politics. Like the Europeans got to do a little bit of a colonialization. Why can't we type shit?
1948.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain, UN assemblies, and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot to dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward, sure. After Stephen, if you want to go a little longer. Also, we should acknowledge the fact that the speaking speeds of people here are different. Stephen speaks about 10 times faster than me. Stephen, do you want to comment on 1948?
Yeah, I think it's interesting where people choose to start the history. I notice a lot of people like to start at either 47 or 48 because it's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. But I feel like when you have this type of reading of history, it feels like the goal is to moralize everything first and then to pick and choose facts that kind of support the statements of your initial moral statement afterwards. Whenever people are talking about 48 or the establishment of the Arab state, I never hear about the fact that a civil war started in 47. That was largely instigated because of the Arab rejectionism of the 47 partition plan. I never hear about the fact that the majority of the land that was...
Yeah, the rejectionism comes from rejecting a settler colonial operation that the British Empire had put forward, and it predates 1947 as well. Just for the record. Bro's so scared of zest and he's covering his face, or because he's fucking banned, dumbass. You know.
Was acquired happened by purchases from Jewish organizations of Palestinian Arabs of the Ottoman Empire before the mandatory period in 1920 even started. Funnily enough, King Abdullah of Jordan was quoted as saying, "The Arabs are as prodigal in selling their land as they are in weeping about it." I never hear about the multiple times that Arabs rejected partition, rejected living with Jews, rejected any sort of state that would have even had any sort of Jewish exclusivity. It's funny because
this is literally rehashing like all the things that they just talked about, by the way.
It was brought up before that
only being presented as like, well, it's really interesting that you're refusing to reckon with some of these facts, right?
The partition plan was unfair, and that's why the Arabs rejected it, as though they rejected it because it was unfair, because of the amount of land that Jews were given, and not just due to the fact that Jews were given land at all, as though a 30% partition or a 25% partition would have been accepted, when I don't think that was the reality of the circumstances. I feel like most of the other stuff has been said, but I noticed that whenever people talk about 48 or the years preceding 48, I think the worst thing that happens is there's a cherry picking of the facts where basically all of the blame is ascribed to this.
Cherry picking of the facts. Dude, okay. I just want to point out something here, but there is no... This is basically just a rehashing of you know, the argument that Benny Moore has presented, which in the simplest, perhaps a little too reductive, but in the simplest terms, is ascribing blame to the victims of ethnic displacement. They deserved it, and also everything that came afterwards, they also deserved. And you can't really make this argument unless you are personally of the mind, the mindset, the opinion that, like, again, Arabs are monolithic and also cannot be reasoned with. They only understand force. And also, other than the fact that Arabs are monolithic, that they were asking for it. Like, they were asking for this ethnic displacement to occur. And that is why, beyond the ethnic displacement that the Palestinians were subjected to, there's a good reason for why they also were made to not return to their ancestral homelands after as well. Like, they resisted settler colonialism, and therefore, you know, Might is right. They resisted settler colonialism. And that's why we had to, you know, carve out the Israeli state in the way that we did.
This built-in idea of Zionism that because of a handful of quotes or because of an ideology, we can say that transfer or population expulsion or basically the mandate of all of these Arabs being kicked off the land was always going to happen, when I think there's a refusal sometimes as well to acknowledge that regardless of the ideas of some of the Zionist leaders, there is a political, social, and military reality on the ground that they're forced to contend with. And unfortunately, the Arabs, because of their inability to engage in diplomacy and only to use tools of war to try to negotiate everything going on in mandatory Palestine, basically always gave the Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land through that way because of their refusal to negotiate on anything else, whether it was the partition plan in 47, whether it was the Lausanne Peace Conference afterwards, where Israel even offered to annex Gaza in 51, where they offered to take in 100,000 refugees. Every single deal is just rejected out of hand because the Arabs don't want a Jewish state anywhere in this region of the world.
I would like to engage Professor Mark.
I mean, he literally did say that. Okay. He said Arabs cannot be reasoned with, basically. Like, that's insane. The problem is that this kind of argumentation does work when the audience that's like receiving this information also kind of has that same underlying assumption due to war on terror, Islamophobia, anti-Arab sentiment that is so ever present in American society, in the Western world in general. So, you know, that is, yes, it's motivated reasoning, and a lot of people do have it, and they don't want to go against their learned prejudices, their learned biases that are basically permanent, like always there. So you're not just arguing against, you're not in that situation. You're never really arguing against like the fundamental facts of history. You're basically arguing against like the social conditioning of a person who is going to have this underlying premise that like Arabs, you can't deal with them. You just have to be violent with them. That's the only way you can That's the only way you can deal with them.
Morris, if you don't mind, I'm not with the first name. It's just not my way of relating.
You can just call me Morris. You don't need the professor.
Okay. There's a real problem here. And it's been a problem I've had over many years of reading your work. Apart perhaps from its grandchild, I suspect nobody knows your work better than I do. I've read it many times, not once, not twice, at least 3 times, everything you've written. And the problem is, it's a kind of quicksilver. It's very hard to grasp a point and hold you to it. So we're going to try here to see whether we can hold you to a point. And then you argue with me the point. I have no problem with that. Your name, please?
Stephen Bonnell.
Okay. Mr. Bonnell referred to cherry picking and handful of quotes. Now,
Isn't it funny that the dude in the chat, by the way, was basically repeating exactly what Mr. Bonnell ended up saying, being like, "Oh, you're cherry picking Benny Morris's work." Actually, turns out I was already fucking duking it out with the video. God damn it, ahead of time.
it's true that when you wrote your first book on the Palestinian refugee question, you only had a few lines on this issue of transfer.
4 pages.
Yeah, in the first book.
In the first book, 4 pages.
Maybe 4. You know, I'm not going to quarrel. My memory's not clear. We're talking about 40 years ago. I read it, but then I read other things about you. Okay. And you were taken to task, if my memory is correct, that you hadn't adequately documented the claims of transfer. Allow me to finish. And I thought that was a reasonable challenge because it was an unusual claim for a mainstream Israeli historian to say.
The reasonable challenge for me is fucking not getting so invested in this conversation that I forget to run the top of the hour ad break again, and then only running it in the middle of the hour again. 2 hours in a fucking row now. And the challenge for you is to avoid said ad break by subscribing for $5 or for free. Here's a 3-minute ad break now.
Say, as you did in that first book, that from the very beginning, transfer figured prominently in Zionist thinking. That wasn't unusual. If you read Anita Shapiro, you read Shabtai Tevitt, that was an unusual acknowledgement by you. And then I found it very impressive that in that revised version of your first book, you devoted 25 pages to copiously documenting the salience of transfer in Zionist thinking. And in fact, you used a very provocative and resonant phrase. You said that transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. We're not talking about circumstantial factors, a war, Arab hostility. You said it's inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. Now, as I said, so we won't be accused of cherry picking, those were 25 very densely argued pages. And then in an interview, and I could cite several quotes, but I'll choose one, you said, removing a population was needed. Let's look at the words. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established. Now, you're the one, again, I was very surprised when I read your book. Here I'm referring to Righteous Victims. I was very surprised when I came to that page 37, where you wrote that territorial displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. Territorial displacement and dispossession were the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. So you then went on to say, because the Arab population rationally
Minor F, minor F, minor F, mini F, Wheezy F, baby. It's fine.
fear, you then went on to say,
I'm going back to the point if you missed it. A little bit of turbulence.
because the Arab population rationally feared territorial displacement and dispossession, it of course opposed Zionism. That's as normal as Native Americans opposing the Euro-American manifest destiny in the history of our own country, because they understood it would be at their expense. It was inbuilt and inevitable. And so now, for you to come along and say that it all happened just because of the war, that otherwise the Zionists made all these plans for a happy minority to live there, that simply does not gel. It does not cohere. It is not reconcilable with what you yourself have written. It was inevitable and inbuilt. Now, in other situations you've said, that's true, but I think it was a greater good to establish a Jewish state at the expense of the indigenous population. That's another kind of argument. That was Theodore Roosevelt's argument in our own country. He said, we don't want the whole of North America to remain a squalid refuge for these wigwams and teepees. We have to get rid of them and make this a great country. But he didn't deny that it was inbuilt and inevitable.
I think you've made your point there. First, I'll take up something that Muin said. He said that the Nakba was inevitable.
As have you.
And predictable. No. I've never said that. It was inevitable and predictable only because the Arabs assaulted the Jewish community and state in 1947-48. Had there been no assault, there probably wouldn't have been a refugee problem. There's no reason for a refugee problem to have occurred, expulsions to have occurred, a dispossession, massive dispossession to occur. These occurred as a result of war. Now, Norman has said that I said that transfer was inbuilt into Zionism in one way or another. And this is certainly true. In order to buy land, they had the Jews bought tracts of land on which some Arabs sometimes lived. Sometimes they bought tracts of land on which there weren't Arab villages, but sometimes they bought land on which there were Arabs. And according to Ottoman law and the British, at least in the initial years of the British mandate, the law said that the people who bought the land could do what they liked with the people who didn't own the land, who were basically squatting on the land, which is the Arab tenant farmers, which is, we're talking about a very small number actually of Arabs who were displaced as a result of land purchases in the Ottoman period or the mandate period. But there was dispossession in one way. They didn't possess the land, they didn't own it, but they were removed from the land. And this did happen in Zionism. And there's, if you like, an inevitability.
Yeah, no, he was talking about like the peaceful ways in which dispossession occurred, you know, through land ownership. It's just real odd that like the land ownership did not pertain to like historically Arab villages, right? Because nobody disputes that like there was definitely land ownership that occurred. Okay. By the way, the very same argument that Benny Morris is presenting here literally right now is disputed in Israeli courts when we talk about Sheikh Jarrah, okay? The land and the homes that are owned by Palestinians under the Ottoman era are still owned by those families to this day, and yet the Israeli courts, for some reason, refuse to acknowledge that as they consistently try to expel the Palestinian population in that area. Just something to consider. This whole like, oh, well, you know, people just came in and they bought the land. Yes, they did. This part is true. There are definitely villages and houses and whatnot that were actually purchased. Okay? I agree. This is a historic fact. Having said that, however, it went far beyond those territorial boundaries. Even the UN partition goes far beyond the purchased land that was bought by the original settlers that were brought there with they were brought there by the British Empire.
In Zionist ideology of buying tracts of land and
for the record, you know, it is really funny to bring this up as an American, you know, like as we are living in the United States of America, because the inception of Israel and the claim that like, well, you know, some of the land was actually purchased by the settlers is pretty funny. Yeah, dude. You know, we did that too. I don't know if you know that. But I don't think he would deny the indigenous genocide, right? I didn't see an F on my end, by the way. I don't think Benny Morris, I don't know, maybe he denies maybe Benny Morris denies the indigenous genocide. I don't know, but be real odd.
Starting to work it yourself and settle it with your own people and so on. That made sense. But what we're really talking about is what happened in 47-48. And in 47-48, the Arabs started a war. And actually, people pay for their mistakes. And the Palestinians have never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. They make mistakes, they attack, they suffer as a result. And we see something similar going on today in the Gaza Strip. They do something terrible. They kill 1,200 Jews. They abduct 250 women and children and babies and old people and whatever. And then they start screaming, please save us from what we did, because the Jews are counterattacking. And this is what happened then. And this is what's happening now. There's something fairly similar in the situation.
You know, what happened then is happening again, but I don't think this argument favors Benny's position. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, no, he's not wrong, technically. Technically, he's not wrong. What happened in the Nakba is continuous. It's still happening. Okay? It's still happening. Except it's not exactly a favorable position for Benny, in my opinion. A huge majority of Palestinians were ethnically cleansed before Arab armies attacked. He is wrong. Well, that too, but again,
here. Expulsion, and this is important, Norman, you should pay attention to this. You didn't raise that. Expulsion, transfer were never policy of the Zionist movement before 47. It doesn't exist in Zionist platforms of the various political parties, of the Zionist organization, of the Israeli state, of the Jewish agency. Nobody would have actually made it into policy because it was always a large minority. If there were people who wanted it, always a large minority of Jewish politicians and leaders would have said, no, this is immoral. We cannot start a state on the basis of an expulsion. So it was never adopted, and actually was never adopted as policy even in 48, even though Ben-Gurion wanted as few Arabs in the course of the war staying in the Jewish state after they attacked it. He didn't want disloyal citizens staying there because they wouldn't have been loyal citizens. But this made sense in the war itself. But the movement itself and its political parties never accepted it. It's true that in 1937, when the British, as part of the proposal by the Peel Commission to divide the country into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, which the Arabs, of course, rejected, Peel also recommended that the Arabs, most of the Arabs in the Jewish state to be, should be transferred, because otherwise, if they stayed and were disloyal to the emergent Jewish state, this would cause endless disturbances, warfare, killing, and so on. So Ben-Gurion and Weizmann latched onto this proposal by the most famous democracy in the world, the British democracy, when they proposed the idea of transfer side by side with the idea of partition, because it made sense. And they said, well, if the British say so, we should also advocate it, but they never actually tried to pass it as Zionist policy, and they fairly quickly stopped even talking about transfer after 1938.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that 47 was an offensive war, not a defensive war.
By the Arabs, yes.
By the Arabs.
Yeah.
And you're also saying that there was never a top-down policy of expulsion.
Yes.
Just to clarify the point.
If I understood you correctly, you're making the claim that transfer, expulsion, and so on was in fact a very localized phenomenon, resulting from individual land purchases, and that, if I understand you correctly, you're also making the claim that the idea that a Jewish state requires a removal or overwhelming reduction of the non-Jewish population was,
if the Arabs are attacking you, yes.
But that, let's say prior to 1947, it would be your claim that the idea that a significant reduction or wholesale removal of the Arab population was not part of Zionist thinking. Well, I think there's two problems with that. I think what you're saying about localized disputes is correct, but I also think that there is a whole literature that demonstrates that transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale than simply individual land purchases. In other words, it went way beyond, we need to remove these tenants so that we can farm this land. The idea.
I love the concept of like, well, it's just a few bad apples that were doing the bad stuff, including like the ethnic displacement, but ultimately it's silly because, like, okay, well, originally Zionism in its inception also wasn't even like consistently or wasn't already agreed upon that Israel would be settled on historic Palestine either. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if there were like arguments, right? Einstein himself would be considered a labor Zionist originally in the inception of the Israeli state. And right now, his sentiment would be considered anti-Zionist. Like everything that Einstein said would be seen as anti-Zionist. There were plenty of people in the inception of the Israeli state that had opinions that talked about like, well, we got to put all these refugees somewhere, right? That would now, if you look at their entire body of work, especially on the development of the Israeli state, would be considered anti-Zionist, like rugged anti-Zionist.
Idea was, we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain and we have to get rid of them. And the second, I think, impediment to that view is that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an exclusivist Jewish state, and that transfer, forced displacement, was fundamental to that project. And just responding to, sorry, was it Bonnell or Donnell?
Yeah.
With a B?
Yeah.
You made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize is that the first and last result for the Arabs is always war.
Yeah, show the contradiction. Benny is not showing problem in the idea that colonization may have been nonviolent, which is impossible because you can't colonize without the removal of peoples. Exactly. Like, Benny's argument ultimately reduces to, because of his earlier work, basically mapping out the expulsion of and the ethnic transfer of Palestinians from their ancestral homes almost always will result in either A, it was for a higher purpose that was ultimately good, which then still justifies the same colonial endeavors, or basically this false reality that never happened, that oh well, they intended to do like a peaceful colonial project without any resistance whatsoever, and because the people that were there resisted at the incredibly violent means that the early Zionist brigades took in this forcible ethnic displacement campaign, that they kind of asked for it. They were just deserving of this inevitable ethnic displacement.
Or, I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, which at the time was the longest recorded general strike in history. You may want to consult the book published last year by Loring Allen, A History of False Hope, which discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. If we look at today, the Palestinians are once again going to the International Court of Justice. They're consistently trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his job. They have launched widespread boycott campaigns. So, of course, the Palestinians have engaged in military resistance. But I think the suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort, and that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality.
I'll respond to that, and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Bennett, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the three of you guys, for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that as soon as the Jews envisioned a state...
Fresher for sure, considering that, one, didn't know where Israel was on a map, two, thought Recep Tayyip Erdogan was the president of Israel at a certain point. So, yeah, I mean, this was, of course, after he had already made up his mind on why genocide is... definitely what must happen. Everything is post hoc rationalizations after that original point that he made weeks before he even started looking at. Oh, did he say Erdogan was the president of Egypt? Is that what you mean? So, he does definitely have fresher eyes on it.
In Palestine, they knew that it would involve some mass...
Yeah. Fresher eyes, like I'm rushing to do my homework after I refused to do it until the very last moment.
Transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point. The issue that I run into is, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it out of hand. So, for instance, when we say that transfer was inevitable, when we say that Zionists would have never accepted, a sizable Arab population, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state? Is your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel all of these Arab citizens from their country? Or how do you explain that in...
Well, here's a really good argument for that, but the Palestinian citizens of Israel didn't actually get full-blown rights until 1967, so it was already an apartheid state from its inception. So yeah, I think it's a pretty solid argument to present that, yeah, no, Israel had no interest in like making the lives of the Arab citizens that were now living in what we know as Israel meaningful or fine. I think that they were doing exactly what they are doing in the West Bank right now on occupied territory that they're illegally occupying. But they were doing that to the Palestinian citizens of Israel that lived inside of the territorial boundaries of what we know as Israel between the time frame of 1948 till 1967. For those of you who don't know, until 1967, Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Arab Christians and Arab Muslims living inside of the Israeli territory, were not subjected to the normal civil court system that Israeli citizens, Jewish citizens of Israel, were utilizing. Even now, by the way, Palestinian citizens of Israel, post 1967, when they were afforded the same, due process instead of being subjected to the martial court, the army court, okay, they still, for example, can be expelled from neighborhoods or be refused entry into, well, not entry, but be refused if they want to like rent an apartment, for example, in a community that is designed specifically for Jewish people. This happens right now, by the way, in 2024, inside of the territorial boundaries of Israel, where Israel consistently says, well, what are you talking about? We have a Arab Supreme Court justice in our Supreme Court. You know what I mean? Like, how could you say this is an apartheid state? This is before we, of course, consider the millions of people trapped inside of Gaza and the millions of people that are trapped under the brutal, oppressive apartheid regime of Israel in occupied West Bank.
Lusan a couple years later that.
By the way, before we move on with this, I do have to say here that like Lex having Destiny on to argue on behalf of Israel is kind of really bad for Benny Morris, because while he is good at invoking emotion and trying to like point out inconsistencies and flaws in the arguments by using like quips and whatnot, ultimately, Norm is a massive debate lord himself, 100%, and he is infinitely more well-versed in this subject matter. This is his life's work, you know what I mean? And all Lex did in this circumstance is basically fucking put ankle weights, as someone pointed out in the chat, on Benny Morris. Like he's literally going. It turns into like a 3v1 at points. I suspect he's fucking bronze in a diamond lobby. Yes.
Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people those citizens. But I'm just curious, how do we get this idea of Zionism always means mass transfer, when there were times, at least early on in the history of Israel and a little bit before it, where Israel would have accepted a state that would have had a massive Arab population in it? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards? Or
is that question to me or Norm?
Or to either one? I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer, yeah.
There's some misunderstandings here, so let's try to clarify that. Number one, it was the old historians who would point to the fact, in Professor Morris's terminology, the old historians, what he called not real historians, he called them chroniclers, not real historians. It was the old Israeli historians who denied the centrality of transfer in Zionist thinking. It was then Professor Morris who...
He's laughing because, once again, Benny's in already a shitty position because of his work. He has spent like the past decade basically trying to justify all of the research that he did in the matter, and so he's already in a shitty position to have to defend his like work while simultaneously justify the morality behind it, the morality behind like the actions that he uncovered, I guess. So having Destiny there makes it even harder for him to do that.
Contrary to Israel's historian establishment, who said, now you remind me it's 4 pages, but it came at the end of the book. It was
No, it's at the beginning of the book.
Transfer.
Yeah, transfer is dealt with in 4 pages at the beginning of my first book on the Palestinian refugee problem.
It's a fault of my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way.
Yeah, but I didn't say it was central to the Zionist experiment. You're saying centrality.
Okay.
I never said it was central. I said it was there, the idea.
By the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also just a quick question, if I may. You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. It's also okay to say those quotes do not reflect the full context of the... So like if we go back, to quotes we've said in the past, and you've both here have written, the three of you have written on this topic a lot, is we should be careful and just admit like, that's
just real quick, just to be clear, that the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this, whereas Benny's saying it's a part of that.
I'm not quoting a part. I'm quoting 25 pages where Professor Morris was at great pains to document the claim that appeared in those early 4 pages of his book. Now, you say it never became part of the official Zionist platform.
It never became part of policy.
Fine.
It wasn't policy.
We're also asked, well, this is true. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? It's because it's a very simple fact, which everybody understands. Ideology doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are real world practical problems. You can't just take an ideology and superimpose it on a political reality and turn it into a fact. It was the British mandate. There was significant Arab resistance to Zionism. And that resistance was based on the fact, as you said, the fear of territorial displacement and dispossession. So you couldn't very well expect the Zionist movement to come out in neon lights and announce, hey, we're going to be expelling you the first chance we get.
Okay,
That's not realistic.
Okay,
Now,
let me respond. Look, you've said it a number of times that the Arabs, from fairly early on in the conflict, from the 1890s or the early 1900s, said the Jews intend to expel us. This doesn't mean that it's true. It means that some Arabs said this, maybe believing it was true, maybe using it as a political instrument to gain support to mobilize Arabs against the Zionist experiment. But the fact is, transfer did not occur before 1947. An Arab.
It's just funny because like history absolved them. So it's like odd to still make this position. I guess it goes back to like, well, you know, I guess some of the early Zionists wanted to do expulsion. And, you know, I guess because it's a settler colonial operation that like some of the natives understood the assignment and recognized what was happening and resisted. But ultimately it's like, you know, maybe they just got lucky and knew that it was going to happen, but like not everyone knew, and they were just being anti-Semitic. So many of the most rugged, like the most fundamentalist dudes have openly said time and time again, like the fucking guy that wrote the 1988 charter himself personally was like, and there is a shit ton, the 1988 Hamas charter, there's a shit ton of anti-Semitism baked into that thing, okay, into that document. And even he has time and time again said, like, listen, the reason why we hate these people is because they are the ones who took our land. Not the Balfour Declaration. I'm talking about 1988. What was it? The fucking blind sheik or whatever his name is. Not the blind sheik. I'm forgetting his name right now. He's like, if it was Christians, we would hate fucking Christians. Like, it's that simple. Yassin, I think. No, is that his name? I don't remember. Ahmed Yassin. But yeah, he's like, it's that simple.
Arabs later said, and since then, have said that the Jews want to build a third temple on the Temple Mount, as if that's what really the mainstream of Zionism has always wanted and always strived for. But this is nonsense. It's something that Husseini used to use as a way to mobilize masses for the cause, using religion as the way to get them to join him. The fact that Arabs said that the Zionists wanted to dispossess us doesn't mean it's true. It just means that some Arabs thought that, maybe said it sincerely and maybe insincerely.
Professor Morris.
Later it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true.
Professor
because
Morris,
the Arabs attacked the Jews.
Professor Morris, I read through your stuff. Even yesterday, I was looking through Righteous Victims.
You should read other things. You're wasting your time.
No, actually, no. I do read other things, but I don't consider it a waste of time to read you. Not at all. You say that this wasn't inherent in Zionism. Now, would you agree that David Ben-Gurion was a Zionist?
A major Zionist leader.
Right. Would you agree Chaim Weizmann was a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe they were. I believe they took their ideology seriously. It was the first generation. Just like with the Bolsheviks, the first generation was committed to an idea. By the 1930s, it was just pure realpolitik. The ideology went out the window. The first generation, I have no doubt about their convictions. Okay? They were Zionists. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
You keep repeating the same thing.
Because I have, as I said, Benny, Mr. Morris, I have a problem reconciling what you're saying. It either was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read, it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
Inevitable and inbuilt.
The idea,
okay.
let me concede
Fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked
Well,
about it.
we keep bringing up this line in the 25 pages and the 4 pages. You know, we're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. Like, we can legitimately ask how.
I mean, it is. I'm glad that he's stepping in, but it is important because, like, it is inconsistent with what he is saying now, I guess, or unless he's openly saying that it was good, which I think he is.
How central is expulsion to Zionism, in its early version of Zionism, in whatever Zionism is
By
today.
the way, the thing that Lex
and
has in
how
front of
much
him, I have
power,
here as well.
influence does Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and like influence the philosophy, the
I
ideology of
think it's
Zionism
like
have
a
on Israel
humidity
today.
and
The Zionist
temperature.
movement up to 1948, Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. And I think Zionist ideology was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the whole
Yeah, he's not rebutting the inconsistency. He's just avoiding the justification. Exactly.
Zionism, like if you like Bolshevism, held the Soviet Union, gradually faded, and a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which have nothing to do with Zionism. But Zionism was very important. But what I'm saying is that the idea of transfer wasn't the core of
think he has a
Zionism. The
time or
idea of
two,
Zionism
yeah.
was to save the Jews who had been vastly persecuted in Eastern Europe and, incidentally, in the Arab world, the Muslim world, for centuries, and eventually ending up with the Holocaust. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jewish people by establishing a state or re-establishing a Jewish state on the ancient Jewish homeland, which is
For the record, this is also not disputed. The problem is that there were people there. That's it. There were people there. You can't do that. You just can't fucking expel these people that were there. Hello, Kaya. Come here. Hello, my baby. Oh my god. What a cutie patootie she is. Okay, place. I'm gonna give you a treat. Girl. Good girl. A banana. Let's see how fast she just rips through that. The fact that they use the saying "a land without a people for a people without a land" gives away the game. They clearly wanted ethno state without Palestinians. Or yeah, oopsie, there are people there in the land. Oops. Anyway, they're cooking. I think they're cooking Benny here. Maybe I'm too biased, but it does feel like he's getting cooked a little bit.
is something the Arabs today even deny, that there were Jews in Palestine or the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. Arafat famously said, what temple was there on Temple Mount? Maybe it was in Nablus, which of course is nonsense. But they had a strong connection for thousands of years to the land to which they wanted to return, and returned there. They found that on the land lived hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and the question was how to accommodate the vision of a Jewish state in Palestine alongside the existence of these Arab masses living on, who were indigenous, in fact, to the land by that stage. And the idea of partition, because they couldn't live together, because the Arabs didn't want to live together with the Jews, and I think the Jews also didn't want to live together in one state with Arabs in general. The idea of partition was the thing which the Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 37 most of Palestine. In 1947, the ratios were changed, but we can live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. And this was the essence of it. The idea of transfer was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But in 1947-48, the Arabs attacked, trying to destroy essentially the Zionist enterprise and the emergent Jewish state. And the reaction was transfer in some way. Not as policy, but this is what happened on the battlefield, and this is also what Ben Gurion at some point began to want as well.
Right. Well, one of the first books on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is once again. I'll use an example that is similar to the inception of the American state, stating that, well, the indigenous populations that lived here started resisting once they started getting fucking murked, and once they started recognizing that like they were losing their ancestral territorial land, and then for that reason it was totally justified to do manifest destiny. It was totally justified to basically forcibly expel them and kill them. It's ridiculous. Which is why the argument then devolves into, well, who's the real natives to that land? And it's ironic because when people say, well, Jews were native to that land, yeah, the people that they're fucking expelling are also native to that land. Many of them can trace their lineage back. A shit ton of the people that are still being slaughtered have ancestral lineage that can be traced back to the inception of Judaism. The fuck? Yeah. They might no longer be Jewish now, but they were back then. The idea that we can account for 3,000 years of history here and make a blood and soil argument for the inception of the Jewish ethno-state is ridiculous. Okay? It's already ridiculous because That's not an argument you can make. Just like right now, if, let's say, in a magical situation, let's say the indigenous populations, but even before the indigenous populations lived here, because like it's 2,000 years, you know what I mean? It's like you can't make a justification for why, I don't know, the entire territory that spans the fucking France belongs to the Mongols, you know what I mean? Like greater Mongolian territory, like you can't do that. You can't say that. It's not an argument you can make. The entire world belongs to Africa. Like, how far back are we going for? How far back are we going until we make a justification? I honestly think Putin has a better argument for annexing Ukraine using this logic. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous when Putin makes that argument. It's ridiculous when when Zionists make this argument. Anyway, was that a real banana or a toy? It was a toy, of course. I will make a justification for the top of the hour coming exactly at the top of the hour this time. Many of you have reminded me in the chat, I will admit, and the 3-minute ad break is upon us. Now, those who justify the top of the hour ad break most likely are also subscribed. I wonder if they'd be on the side of Native Americans if natives just started just murking Americans. Exactly. Like now, if now Native Americans came in and were just like nuking fucking population dense areas, like people will be like, what the fuck are you doing? That's insane. All right, here's the 3-minute ad break now.
I read when I was still in high school, because my late father had it, was the Diaries of Theodor Herzl. And I think, Theodor Herzl, of course, was the founder of the contemporary Zionist movement. And I think if you read that, it's very clear. For Herzl, the model upon which the Zionist movement would proceed, his model was Cecil Rhodes. I think, Rhodes, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, has quite a prominent place in Herzl's diaries. I think Herzl was also corresponding with him and seeking his support. Cecil Rhodes, of course, was the British colonialist after whom the former white minority regime in Rhodesia was named. And Herzl also says explicitly in his diaries that it is essential to remove the existing population from Palestine.
Can I respond to this?
In a moment, please. He says we shall have to spirit the penniless population across the borders and procure employment for them elsewhere or something. And Israel Zangwill, who you mentioned, a land without a people for a people without a land. They knew damn well it wasn't a land without a people. I'll continue, but please go ahead.
Just to this, there is one small diary entry in Herzl's vast.
It's 5 volumes.
Yeah, 5 volumes. There's one paragraph which actually mentions the idea of transfer. There are people who think that Herzl was actually pointing to South America when he was talking about that. The Jews were going to move to Argentina, and then they would try and buy out or buy off or spirit the.
Wait a minute. Doesn't that literally also still say that, like, no matter where the Zionist project was going to be incepted, that the transfer was going to occur regardless? What the fuck? Bro, it happened. Like, it already happened. Why is he acting like it didn't happen when he recognizes that it happened? It's just the same argument. It's such a weird... It's such a weird situation. Okay,
the penniless natives to make way for Jewish settlement. Maybe he wasn't even talking about the Arabs in that particular passage. That's the argument of some people.
That doesn't even matter. That doesn't even matter because guess what? Whether it's Argentina, whether it is what was it? Was it Alaska? Was another one, and then was it Rwanda or Uganda? I think it was Argentina and Uganda. That were the two places that they were talking about. Part of the reason why Uganda was actually cast aside as a place for the Jewish homeland to exist in was because the British thought that the indigenous tribes there would put up too strong of a fucking resistance, and therefore it would be better to settle the Jewish people living in the British Empire into Palestine, mandatory Palestine. But that still does not change the underlying, very valid argument that no matter where these guys were going to go, they were going to do ethnic transfer, forcible displacement, or rather displacement of some sorts of the ethnicity that already existed in that land through peaceful means somehow. There is, you know what's really funny about this? I remember back in the day when this guy used to debate fucking Nazis and white supremacists and ethno-nationalists of different sorts. I remember very distinctly an argument he used to make that there can never be a peaceful transfer and peaceful ethnic displacement. I remember to the T, one of his arguments, every single time he talked to a Nazi was like, okay, let's say you're an ethno-nationalist. Here's why you can never be a peaceful ethno-nationalist. And then he would walk the Nazis through the steps of argumentation until they had to forcibly concede that, yes, there would always be some kind of violence and the removal of people from the land that they wanted to live in and not leave. I'm sure there are some, Destiny dick riders in the chat or former fans of Destiny that could pull it up personally. Because I remember distinctly him making this argument. Now he's on the other side when it comes to defending Israel, of course, which is, again, still an ethno-nationalist project and therefore just as fascist and just as violent.
Maybe he was. But the point is, it has only a 1/100th of a 1% of the diary which is devoted to the subject. It's not a central idea in Herzl's thinking. What Herzl wanted, and this is what's important, not Rhodes, I don't think he was the model. Herzl wanted to create a liberal, democratic, Western state in Palestine for the Jews. That was the idea. Not some imperial enterprise serving some imperial master, which is what Rhodes was about. But to have a Jewish state which was modeled on the Western democracies in Palestine. And this, incidentally, was more or less what Weizmann and Ben-Gurion wanted. Ben-Gurion was more of a socialist. Weizmann was more of a liberal Westerner, but they wanted to establish a social democratic or liberal state in Palestine. And they both envisioned through most of the years of their activity that there would be an Arab minority in that Jewish state. It's true that Ben-Gurion strived to have as small as possible an Arab minority in the Jewish state because he knew.
Oh, okay. They just, they just wanted to do a little bit of ethnic displacement. You know what I mean? And they wanted to do it peacefully. And, they wanted to make sure it was as small as possible. But hey, look no further. Okay, how? How do you make it as small as possible? No, this is an old one. This is like when he used to...
and residential building.
Okay, it's fine. This is the very old debate.
That if you want a Jewish majority state, that would be necessary. But it's not something which they were willing to translate into actual policy.
Just a quick pause to mention that for people who are not familiar, Theodor Herzl, we're talking about over a century ago. And everything we've been talking about has been mostly 1948 and before.
Yes. Just one clarification on Herzl's diaries. I mean, the other thing that I recall from those diaries is he was very preoccupied with, in fact, getting great power patronage, seeing Palestine, the Jewish state in Palestine, I think his words, an outpost of civilization against barbarism.
Yes.
In other words, very much seeing his project as a proxy for Western imperialism in the Middle East.
Right word. Not proxy. He wanted to establish a Jewish state which would be independent. To get that, he hoped that he would be able to garner support from major imperial powers.
Including the Ottoman Sultan, who he tried to cultivate. I just want to respond to a point you made earlier, which was that people expressed their rejection of the partition resolution on the grounds that it gave the majority of Palestine to the Jewish community, which formed only a third. Whereas, in fact, if I understood you correctly, you're saying the Palestinians and the Arabs would have rejected any partition resolution.
Yeah,
I think
a couple things. That one, they would have rejected any. Two, a lot of that land given was in the Negev. It was pretty terrible land at the time. And three, the land that would have been partitioned to Jews, I think would have been, I think I saw it was like 500,000 Arabs. It would have been 500,000 Jews, 400,000 Arabs, and I think like 80,000 Bedouin would have been there. So the state would have been.
I think you raise a valid point because I think the Palestinians did reject the partition of their homeland in principle. And I think the fact that the United Nations General Assembly then awarded the majority of their homeland to the Zionist movement only added insult to injury. I mean, one doesn't have to sympathize with the Palestinians to recognize that they have now been a stateless people for 75 years. Can you name any country, yours, for example, or yours, that would be prepared to give 55%, 25%, 10% of your country to the Palestinians? Of course not. And so the issue was not the existence of Jews in Palestine. They had been there for centuries. And of course, they had ties to Palestine, and particularly to Jerusalem and other places, going back centuries, if not millennia. But the idea of establishing an exclusively Jewish state at the expense of those who are...
Unless you're Neil Gorsuch, baby. Unless you're Neil Gorsuch and we're talking about the wonderful state of Oklahoma. the only instance in modern society where land has been given back by massive quantities to the indigenous population.
Were already living there. I think it was right to reject that. And I don't think we can look back now, 75 years later, and say, well, you should have accepted losing 55% of your homeland because you ended up losing 78% of it, and the remaining 22% was occupied in 1967. That's not how things work.
Yeah.
And I can imagine an American rejecting giving 10% of the United States to the Palestinians, and if that rejection leads to war and you lose half your country, I doubt that 50 years from now you're going to say, well, maybe I should have accepted that.
Sure. So I like this answer more than what I usually feel like I'm hearing when it comes to the Palestinian rejection of the 47 partition plan. Because sometimes I feel like a weird switch happens to where the Arabs and the
He's like, you've presented a good argument, which is why instead of addressing that good argument, I am now going to talk about bad arguments that actually suit my position a little bit better. It's like, bro, you're sitting across the table from academics, dog. What do you mean? Like, well, let me actually now argue against the stupid argument that I think is stupid and force you to basically defend the argument that I've presented in a way that is probably not going to look good. It's ridiculous.
in the area are actually presented as entirely pragmatic people who are simply doing a calculation and saying like, well, we're losing 55% of our land. Jews are only maybe 1/3 of the people here, and we've got 45. And the math doesn't work basically. But it wasn't.
By the way, most people don't argue on the way that he is behaving, and also it is still pragmatic. It is still understandable that people were like, "Hey, what the fuck? We're losing our land." To people that just came here 10 years ago. I've been living here for 100 years. My family's been here for 100 years. Okay? So it still makes sense. And history has also, you know, vindicated them in the worst way possible, but still.
A math problem. I think, like you said,
it was a matter of principle.
It was an ideology problem.
No, it was a matter of principle.
Yeah, ideologically driven. That they, as a people, have a right to or are entitled to this land that they've never actually had an independent state on, that they've never had even a guarantee of an independent state on, that they've never actually ruled.
That last point is actually not correct, because for all its injustice, the mandate system recognized Palestine as a Class A mandate, which provisionally recognized the independence of that territory.
Of what would emerge from that territory, but not the Palestinian.
It was provisionally recognized.
But not.
Yeah, it's also ahistoric. Like, oh, let's not talk about the morality of the situation is a really fucking cowardly way to talk about the forcible ethnic displacement of an entire population, but it's also ahistorical.
But the territory itself was, but not of the Palestinian people to have a right or a guarantee to a government.
Well,
that
it was a British mandate.
I found the debate where D takes step by step why the ethno-state would be bad.
But then we'd still be losing, like, okay, so another big one is, like, I value whiteness and white culture.
Okay, there we go. So it sounds like, are you familiar with the term motivated reasoning?
I can probably guess what it means.
Okay, sure. So just to be clear, like, motivated reasoning is, let's say I really want to, let's say that I really want to stick my dick inside of a fucking car exhaust, right? Let's say that I go out and somebody's like, hey, you shouldn't do this, and then I like make like 50 million arguments for why I should be allowed to do it or why it's okay to do it, and you can tell that I'm just arguing it because I really want to be able to do this thing. I don't really care what the argument is. I just really want to get that end result of fucking my car's exhaust. It feels like when I talk to a lot of ethno-state people, it feels like we're engaging constantly in this weird motivated reasoning where it's very clear that you don't want colored people in your country, but why not just do that? Like, let's do the ethical or let's do the philosophical argument of having colored people in the country. Don't bring up like crime or taxes or any weird stuff like that, because it's clear that you don't really care about that.
If I just say I just want black colored people gone just because I like white people more, I think it would stand a lot better if I just if I had some numbers as to why.
Well, but the problem is all of those numbers. But the problem is that those numbers betray you. I mean, it works on the average normie because the average.
Bro, we know he has no idea now. What is he talking about? Why do we need to listen to him knowing less 5 years ago? Because the argument that he's presenting is not one where you need to have knowledge. He's just logically walking through the steps of why you cannot have a peaceful ethno-state. Okay? In order to develop an ethno-state, you have to engage in population transfer. You don't need Wikipedia pages of historical information to arrive at this conclusion. It's a pretty basic one. I mean, obviously, you know, a little bit of historical lessons could help you, right? But he's actually doing a logical argument here. He's making an argument based on logic. And that argument, if he was actually a consistent person, would absolutely fit the bill when talking about the inception of the Israeli state. The difference is he's on the side of the ethno-nationalists on this issue. That's why I'm showing you this. And I'm also not just showing you this, I'm showing his fans this. Because some of his fans probably started watching him after his like red pill debates as he presented himself as like, a pretty solid debater, which I've always said he is, and maybe don't know that like this is actually profoundly inconsistent with his original moral posturing and his positions, or even just it defies pure logic.
Person's a fucking moron. But if you really want to have like a solid good argument, right, you can't like, if somebody says I want to get rid of all the colors, you're like, okay, well, why? Well, because of crime. Well, why not get rid of all criminals? Okay, well, because of taxes. Well, why not get rid of everybody that takes more in taxes? Okay, well, IQ. Well, why not just get rid of all the low IQ people, right? But it always comes back to, well, I would want to keep the white ones and get rid of the black ones. So let's just go to the...
Yeah, you're right. I think I am engaging in your motivated reasoning.
Sure.
And so, I probably couldn't tell you why, and like all the stuff I've given you today is just like my confirmation bias and just like trying to sell you on why I want these things. But I probably can't articulate why I want it. I just want it. And okay. I like the, I think I can. So like, do you think culture
Well, here, wait, real quick. Okay. So we're moving away from all of the hard empirical stuff. So things like crime and right? And we're going to move into more softer things. I just want to make sure so that, or I'm understanding, right? We're moving into like culture and whatnot now?
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right, okay, go for it. Now we're on to culture and stuff.
Okay, so do you think culture would be like intertwined with race in any way?
I would say it is in a correlated way. Like people of certain races probably tend to do certain things a certain way, but that's just because of geographically where they live and the type of stuff they participate in.
Do you think like a certain race could share certain values just
Yeah, for
inherently?
sure.
Like,
yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Okay, from there, I'd like to say I value whiteness and white culture, and that like we could just look around and see all the countries, so, like all the prospering ones. Like, well, if I was gonna do that, I could just do it by IQ, since like all like the prospering countries are above the IQ threshold.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I just wanted to say I'm kind of shocked that this guy's a platform on any of these respective outlets with the level of hate he spewed lately. Even your most controversial quotes aren't a fraction of what he said. Yes, because he positions himself as a progressive, or rather a liberal, who is a defender of Joe Biden. And then he can like hide under that umbrella fairly well. It doesn't really, he can just present himself as a liberal, and then people will go, oh, well, he's just a liberal who's like a little edgy. No one fucking basically has the same dedicated audience that he has to have entire paste bins dedicated to all the shit that he has said, not even out of context, like in context, in the same way that like I have a dedicated audience of haters that are probably in here right now. That have an entire paste bin full of data that they can point to be like, he's a piece of shit for this, and this reason. So most people don't even know all of the weird, horrifying, awful things that he said. Damn, Kaya has already fucking destroyed the banana peel. He does not have obsessed haters. He has some, I think. But they are nowhere near as obsessed as his community is. And therefore, most people are unaware of his like quotes, because no one is like as permanently brain broken and as permanently online as we are, or as his community is. So they just probably don't know. No one has like really made like a big stink about it. You know what I mean? That's it.
But another one would be, I would want my
hold
children...
on, because I have to make sure that we're not doing the proxy bullshit again. When you say I could just do it by IQ, does that mean that you think that a white person with an IQ of 120?
No, that was just me thinking out loud like a dummy.
Okay, so we're getting rid of that, because my question is going to be: would a white IQ 120 person share more in common with a black 120 IQ person than with a white 100 IQ person?
That I'd say no.
Okay, so then the IQ, that was total garbage. So I'm throwing that out. Okay, go ahead. So we're at value, whiteness, and white culture.
White. Oh yeah, value, whiteness. Oh yeah. So it's just like I think whites. Oh, because we can just look at like voting patterns.
Okay. I don't care about the voting patterns. I'm fairly certain that he walks him through the steps of like how you can't have a peaceful transfer of an ethnic population here.
See, like,
okay, so I have to...
like First, Second, overwhelmingly for these things like smaller government, individual liberties and whatnot, like First, Second Amendments. And
this is not the best part of this. Bro, just turn on a Hitler speech. Okay, chill.
It's
Let's
Palestine,
continue.
not the British Mandate of Israel.
The word exclusive,
As an Israeli, I recognize that settling in a land that you are not wanted is intrinsically violent, no matter your intentions or ways. But the Zionist idea was that we would settle a state whether people want it or not, because Jews can't trust other people's states to keep them safe. Zionism is about making your existence a fact. It doesn't make it right, but you seem to think Zionism tries to be purely driven by rationale. No, I think that's a really good way to describe it. I know. That's why I think like pogroms and the Holocaust play a really. No, I don't think this guy is wrong at all. I don't think Zionism is purely driven by rationale. I think it is driven by the understandable fear in shared Jewish history due to pogroms and the Holocaust. So I bring this up regularly. It is a very important part of Zionism in general. I just don't think it's a justifiable proposition, if that makes sense. I do believe that this guy is definitely an Israeli, by the way, because like most people don't even understand this aspect of it. And usually just like repeat Hasbara or shit that they've heard or shit that they learned in school. Do you really agree with what he said? Doesn't that justify anti-immigration somehow? No, I don't agree. I agree with what he's saying, which is facts. He literally is saying it doesn't make it right, but you seem to think Zionism tries to be purely driven by rationale, like rational thinking. No, I do think it's driven by understandable fears. It's driven by understandable fears. Fears of centuries of shared Jewish history, from pogroms to the Holocaust, that this is like, if there isn't a Jewish only state, then it'll happen again, right? That is the underlying fear. And that fear is understandable, but fear makes you do irrational things. So I don't think that it is the intergenerational trauma justifies the actions that the early Zionists engaged in. Every single person that is important in this conversation, all three of the people that are having this conversation right now would agree to everything that you said. They would probably take a different approach to it, though. Like, all three of the significant people in this conversation would agree with that. I agree with that as well. I'm talking about the idea that settling in a land that you are not wanted is violent. Yes. Yes, settling in a land that you are not wanted is almost always going to be violent. This is at the foundation of settler colonialism. Do you really agree with what he said? Doesn't that justify anti-immigration somehow? No, because immigration under normal circumstances is voluntary and is done with consent. That's the difference. Even the most aggressive, like right-wing reactionaries, still recognize the role that immigrants play in this country. Only the most delusional racist people don't. The difference between immigration, however, in the way that it occurs currently in the United States of America, is not that it is not guided or directed by a state with a deliberate attempt to displace the local population. Like, even asylum seekers themselves currently that come into this country, one, are not actually like being directed by their host nation to go and like invade the country in the same way that settler colonialism exists, right? And two, they're actually abiding by the rules that we created. When they touch base, when they touch American land, they are literally doing what they are legally and morally, but certainly legally within their rights to do.
Damn, this guy's good.